The 1930 U.S. tariff that created a dictator. June 17, 1930, Washington, D.C. A pen hovers over a piece of paper. The room is silent except for the scratch of ink on parchment. President Herbert Hoover signs his name. In that moment he believes he is saving American farmers. He believes he is protecting American jobs. He believes he is making America stronger. He is wrong. What Hoover just signed isn't a farm bill. It's a financial grenade with the pin pulled. And the shrapnel won't just hit America. It will tear through the balance sheets of every nation on earth. We've been told that Hitler rose because of hate, because of charisma, because Germans were angry about Versailles. That's the story, but it's incomplete. Hitler didn't rise on rage alone. He rose on bankruptcies. He rose on foreclosures. He rose on the ashes of a German economy that was suffocated by a trade war that never started. The real story isn't in Berlin. It starts in a Senate chamber in Washington. It starts with a tariff, and it starts with a lie. Let's rewind to the 1920s. America is flying. The Roaring Twenties aren't just a phrase. They're a reality written in steel and stock certificates. GDP growth averages 4.2% every single year. Factories hum day and night. Cities glow with electric lights. Jazz music pours out of every speakeasy. Wealth is everywhere, or so it seems. Ticker tape machines chatter out fortunes in real time. The stock market is a casino where everyone thinks they're winning. Skyscrapers punch through the clouds. The Empire State Building is being dreamed into existence. This is the age of Ford, of Edison, of limitless American ambition. The world looks at America and sees the future. But beneath the champagne and confetti, the ledger is starting to bleed. Income inequality is widening like a canyon. The top 1% holds nearly 20% of all wealth. Debt is piling up in every corner of the economy. Consumer credit explodes. Mortgages are handed out like candy. And in the countryside, far from the glittering cities, American farmers are drowning. During World War I, American farmers fed the world. Europe was a battlefield. French fields were cratered by artillery. German farms were stripped for the war machine. British agriculture couldn't keep up with demand, so America stepped in. Wheat prices soared. Corn became gold. Farmers borrowed heavily to buy more land, more equipment, more seed. They expanded because the demand seemed endless. But then the war ended. Europe rebuilt. French farmers returned to their fields. German agriculture recovered. Suddenly, American farmers had competition again, and the prices collapsed. Wheat that sold for $2.50 a bushel in 1920 dropped to under $1 by 1929. Farmers who borrowed at high prices now had to repay loans with crops worth half as much. Foreclosures swept through the Midwest like a plague. Family farms that had stood for generations were auctioned off to banks. Desperation grew. And desperate people make noise. Farming unions mobilized. They flooded Congress with letters. They organized protests in small towns and state capitals. Their message was simple and urgent. Protect us or watch us die. In 1928, presidential candidate Herbert Hoover heard them. Hoover was a Republican, a self-made millionaire, a man who believed in American exceptionalism. He promised farmers that if elected, he would raise tariffs on agricultural imports. He would give them a shield against foreign competition. It was a popular promise. It won him votes. It won him the presidency. and it set the stage for disaster. But first, let's understand what a tariff actually is, because this word is about to reshape the world. A tariff is a tax on imports. When country A sells goods to country B can slap a tariff on those goods. The importer, not the exporter, pays the tariff. This is critical. If America puts a 20% tariff on Canadian lumber, the American company importing that lumber pays the tax to the U.S. government. Then, to stay profitable, that company raises prices. So American consumers pay more for lumber. The tariff is sold as protection for American lumber companies, but it's paid for by American families. That's the trap. Tariffs look like shields, but they're often just hidden taxes on your own people. Hoover won the election in late 1928. By early 1929, the economy was already slowing. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates to cool down speculation. It worked too well. By August 1929, the U.S. economy slipped into recession. Then in October, the stock market crashed. Billions of dollars evaporated in days. Panic spread like wildfire. Banks failed. Businesses closed. Unemployment spiked. Hoover was now president of a country in free fall. But he had made a promise to the farmers. So he called Congress into special session. His proposal was modest. Raise tariffs on agricultural products only. Help the farmers. Keep the promise. But Congress had other ideas. Specifically, two men had other ideas. Willis Hawley chaired the House Ways and Means Committee. Reed Smoot chaired the Senate Finance Committee. Both were Republicans. Both believed in protectionism. And both saw an opportunity. Why stop at farm tariffs? Why not protect every American industry? Steel, textiles, chemicals, glass, rubber. Protect it all. Build a wall around the American economy. Make foreign goods so expensive that Americans would have no choice but to buy American. It sounded patriotic. It sounded strong. It was economic suicide. Lobbyists swarmed Capitol Hill. Every industry wanted protection. Every senator had a favor to repay. The bill grew and grew. What started as a farm rescue became a tariff on over 20,000 imported goods. Rates were raised by an average of 20%. Some tariffs doubled. The bill was monstrous, and it faced fierce opposition. A coalition of Democrats and progressive Republicans fought it for over a year. They filibustered. They proposed amendments. They warned of retaliation. They screamed that this would trigger a global trade war, but the protectionists had momentum. The stock market had crashed. Fear was in the air, and fear makes people crave walls. In June 1930, the Senate passed the bill 44-42. The House overwhelmingly approved it, 222 to 153. Now it sat on Hoover's desk, one signature away from becoming law. The world held its breath. While Washington debated, Germany was barely holding on. The Weimar Republic was a democracy born in the ashes of World War I. It was fragile. The Treaty of Versailles had crushed Germany with reparations. Germany owed billions to France, Britain, and Belgium. The only way they could pay was by borrowing from American banks. This was the lifeline. American capital flowed into Germany throughout the 1920s. It kept the lights on. It kept factories running. It kept the Weimar government alive. But that lifeline was a noose. Any disruption in American lending would strangle Germany. And disruption was coming. Back in Washington, 1,000 economists signed a petition. They begged Hoover to veto the tariff bill. The petition was organized by Paul Douglas, a University of Chicago economist. The signatories included some of the greatest economic minds in America. Their warning was clear and desperate. This bill will destroy international trade. It will deepen the depression. It will destabilize fragile democracies abroad. Do not sign it. Hoover read the petition. He dismissed it. He believed the economists were overreacting. He believed foreign protests were just negotiating tactics. He believed he could sign the bill and the world would adjust. He was catastrophically wrong. On June 17, 1930, Hoover signed the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act into law. The pen stroke took 3 seconds. The consequences would last decades. Within days, foreign governments retaliated. Canada, America's largest trading partner, immediately raised tariffs on U.S. goods. Europe followed. France, Italy, Spain, Switzerland all imposed counter-tariffs. Some countries went further. They organized outright boycotts of American products. The global trading system began to collapse. It wasn't a slow decline. It was a cliff. American exports fell from $7 billion in 1929 to $2.5 billion by 1932. That's a 65% drop in 3 years. Imports collapsed at the same rate. International trade didn't slow. It died. Ships sat idle in harbors. Factories that relied on exports closed. Workers were laid off by the millions. And the farmers, the ones Hoover tried to save, their exports dropped by more than 30%. The tariff didn't protect them. It buried them. Foreign countries stopped buying American wheat, cotton, and tobacco. Prices fell even further. Foreclosures accelerated. The very people the tariff was meant to help were destroyed by it. But the worst damage wasn't in America. It was in Germany. When American banks started failing in 1930 and 1931, they recalled their loans. German banks depended on that American money. Without it, they collapsed. In 1931, one of Germany's largest banks, Danette Bank, went under. Panic spread. Germans rushed to withdraw their savings. The Weimar government froze bank accounts. Businesses couldn't pay workers. Unemployment exploded. In 1929, Germany had 1.3 million unemployed. By 1932, that number hit 6 million. That's nearly 30% of the workforce. Families lost everything. Men who fought in World War I and survived the trenches now stood in breadlines. Hunger became common. Humiliation became universal. And in that humiliation, a voice emerged. A voice that promised to restore German pride. A voice that blamed everyone else for Germany's suffering. His name was Adolf Hitler. In 1928, his Nazi party received 2.6% of the vote. They were a fringe movement. Extremists ignored by mainstream Germany. But by 1932, they were the largest party in the Reichstag. Economic collapse had given Hitler his army. Not soldiers, voters, desperate, broken, furious voters. Historian Charles Kindleberger studied this period for decades. His conclusion was blunt. The 1930 tariff and the subsequent commercial war was a critical factor in the rise of Hitler. It wasn't the only factor. Versailles, hyperinflation, and German nationalism all played roles. But the economic chaos triggered by Smoot-Hawley created the conditions for extremism to flourish. Think about that. A farm bill signed in Washington helped put a dictator in power in Berlin. The pen that Hoover used didn't just sign a tariff. It signed a death warrant for millions. By January 1933, Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany. The Weimar Republic was dead. Democracy in Germany was dead, and the world was about to pay the price. Meanwhile, in America, Hoover's presidency collapsed. In the 1932 election, he faced Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Hoover defended his record. He argued that tariffs were necessary. Voters didn't buy it. VR won in a landslide. Hoover was humiliated. Reed Smoot lost his Senate seat. Willis Hawley lost his House seat. The American people rejected protectionism at the ballot box, but the damage was done. FDR took office in March 1933. His first task was to clean up the mess. He was given new powers to negotiate trade agreements. He slowly began dismantling the Smoot-Hawley Tariffs. It took years. Throughout the 1930s, FDR signed reciprocal trade agreements with dozens of countries. Tariffs were lowered. Trade began to recover. But the scars remained. The global economy didn't fully recover until after World War II. Some economists argue it never fully recovered. The trust between nations was broken. The idea that trade was mutually beneficial was shattered. Countries turned inward. Nationalism surged. And in that environment, militarism thrived. Japan invaded Manchuria. Italy invaded Ethiopia. Germany rearmed. The stage was set for another world war, and it all started with a tariff, not a bullet, not a bomb. A tax, because in the end, wars aren't just fought with guns. They're fought with ledgers, and in 1930, the ledger declared war on the world. Let's zoom out for a moment. Why did this happen? How did smart men make such a catastrophic mistake? The answer is simple. They didn't think globally. They thought nationally. Hoover believed he could protect America without consequences abroad. Congress believed tariffs would boost American jobs. They ignored the fact that trade is a two-way street. When you block imports, other countries block your exports. When you strangle foreign economies, they can't buy your goods. It's not complicated. But in moments of fear, people don't think clearly. They crave simple solutions. Build a wall. Raise the tariffs. Protect our own. It sounds strong. It feels patriotic. But economics doesn't care about feelings. The market is a machine, and machines don't forgive mistakes. When you jam the gears, the whole system breaks. That's what Smoot-Hawley did. It jammed the gears of global trade, and the machine ground to a halt. The aftermath of Smoot-Hawley lasted for generations. Germany's trauma from the early 1930s shaped its politics for decades. Even after World War II, Germans were terrified of inflation and economic instability. That fear still influences German policy today. In America, the lesson was learned. For the next 80 years, U.S. trade policy moved toward openness. NAFTA, the World Trade Organization, free trade agreements across the globe. America positioned itself at the center of the global economy, not through walls, but through connections. This wasn't charity. It was strategy. By integrating other economies with America, the U.S. ensured its own prosperity. When the world trades freely, everyone benefits. Not equally, but significantly. Jobs are lost in some sectors and gained in others. Communities are disrupted, but overall wealth increases. That's the promise of free trade, and for decades it worked. But the costs were real. Manufacturing jobs moved overseas. Entire towns were gutted. Rust Belt cities became graveyards of industry, and the people left behind felt abandoned. They felt betrayed. And in that resentment, old ideas began to resurface. Ideas about walls, ideas about tariffs, ideas about protecting our own. Fast forward to today. Tariffs are back. In 2025, a new administration has revived the language of Smoot-Hawley. Tariffs on steel, on aluminum, on Chinese goods, on allies and adversaries alike. The justification is familiar. Protect American jobs. Punish unfair trade practices. Make America strong again. The echoes are loud, and economists are sounding the alarm. Again, just like in 1930, hundreds of economists have warned against aggressive tariff policies. Just like in 1930, their warnings are dismissed as pessimism. Just like in 1930, political leaders believe they can control the consequences. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And right now, the rhyme is deafening. The stock market has already reacted. Trillions of dollars in value have been wiped out in days. Trading partners are threatening retaliation. Some have already acted. The global supply chain, far more complex than in 1930, is under strain, and the most vulnerable economies are watching nervously because they've seen this movie before. Let's be clear, not all tariffs are wrong. Strategic tariffs on specific goods for national security can make sense. Protecting critical industries during wartime is rational, but blanket tariffs designed to reshape entire economies, are dangerous. They're blunt instruments, and blunt instruments cause collateral damage. In 1930, the collateral damage was the Weimar Republic. It was German democracy. It was global stability. The question we face now is simple. What will the collateral damage be this time? We live in a more interconnected world than 1930. Supply chains span continents. A smartphone has parts from a dozen countries. A car is assembled in 3. When you disrupt one link, the whole chain shatters, and the economic pain spreads faster than ever. China, America's largest trading partner, is already retaliating. Europe is preparing countermeasures. Smaller nations are choosing sides. The global economy is fragmenting. And in that fragmentation, opportunities arise, not for prosperity, for demagogues, for extremists, for anyone who can offer simple answers to complex problems. That's the real danger. Not the tariffs themselves, but what they unleash. Let's go back to Germany one last time. In 1933, Hitler promised to restore German greatness. He promised jobs, pride, and revenge. He blamed external enemies for Germany's suffering. Jews, communists, foreign bankers, the Treaty of Versailles. He offered a narrative that made sense of the chaos, and desperate people believed him. Because when you're unemployed, when your savings are gone, when your children are hungry, you'll believe anyone who promises to fix it. That's the lesson of 1930. Economic collapse doesn't just destroy wealth. It destroys trust. Trust in government, trust in democracy, trust in the system itself. And when trust dies, authoritarianism thrives. Hitler didn't take power by force. He was elected. He was appointed through legal means. Germans chose him, not because they were evil, but because they were desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous. Smoot-Hawley didn't pull the trigger on World War II, but it loaded the gun. It created the conditions. It pushed fragile economies over the edge. And in the chaos, monsters rose. So what do we take from this? What's the lesson? It's simple. Sovereignty is solvency. A nation's power isn't measured by its military alone. It's measured by its balance sheet. When the money runs out, everything else collapses. Alliances break. Democracies fail. Extremism wins. The ledger is the foundation. And when the foundation cracks, the whole structure falls. In 1930, America cracked the foundation. Not just its own, but the world's. And the world paid the price. Millions of lives. Entire cities reduced to rubble. A generation scarred by war. All because of a tariff. All because of a signature on a piece of paper. That's the power of economics. It's not abstract. It's not boring. It's life and death. It's the difference between peace and war. Between democracy and dictatorship. Between prosperity and collapse. And it's decided not on battlefields, but in ledgers.